The United States Congress has set a date. If things do not change, TikTok could be banned in the country on 19th of January 2025. They claim that national security itself is at stake.
For the first time in history, Congress has enacted a law that subjects a single, named speech platform to a permanent, nationwide ban and bars every American from participating in a unique online community with more than 1 billion people worldwide.
In this video, we're going to tell you what is going on, why it is happening, and where exactly the real problem lies in this huge mess that has arisen around the queen of short video apps. So, let's get on with it. The truth? I don't think it needs any introduction. TikTok, an extensive buffet of terribly addictive short videos, has become a mass phenomenon, a real social earthquake. In a very short time, it has positioned itself as one of the most used applications worldwide. In the United States alone, TikTok has 170 million users who, on average, spend 54 minutes a day on it. I've already told you that it is tremendously addictive. This application is very popular among women, and curiously, among the Hispanic population. But above all, it is very popular amongst the youngest users, among the so-called Z generation. Yes, I will say Z, I'm British. Basically, you could say that TikTok is becoming the favorite means of social interaction for tens and tens of millions of young people in the United States and of course in the rest of the world as well. But today, we are only talking about North America. And in the land of Uncle Sam, 7 out of 10 teenagers are already actively using this app. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar business that is estimated to have an annual turnover of more than $6 billion in the United States alone, thanks to advertising. Major advertisers such as L'Oreal, Victoria's Secret, and Hugo Boss have made titanic efforts to gain a foothold on TikTok.
Has there ever been an app more American-seeming than TikTok, with its messy democratic creativity, exhibitionism, utter lack of limits, and vast variety of hustlers?
But beyond all these stunning figures, there is something that is rarely taken into account, and that, nevertheless, is starting to make the hairs on the back of the necks of the leaders of the US national security agencies stand on end. TikTok is becoming a powerful tool for consuming current affairs. No kidding. Beyond the cute clips of grandparents dancing to reggaeton, videos of kittens, and cooking recipes without microwaves, more than 40% of TikTok users in the United States, some 70 million people, already use this platform to keep abreast of current events. 70 million Americans, which, naturally, even taking out the younger ones, amounts to many millions of votes. So of course, I don't need to tell you that this has enormous political consequences. President Biden's own re-election campaign has not long ago opened its own account on this platform. However, there is one problem. TikTok belongs to ByteDance, which currently owns the algorithm, the brain behind all its success. But now, all this could come to an end. VisualPolitik community, the Congress of the United States of America, has passed a law which has been signed by President Biden, stating that TikTok will disappear from the United States on 19th of January 2025 if the company does not definitively cut its ties with the People's Republic of China. And let me tell you all that there is a lot more to this than meets the eye. But first, I'd like to ask you something. What precautions do you take when you browse online, especially when connecting to public Wi-Fi networks? Internet security is crucial, and this is where NordVPN becomes a real lifesaver. With NordVPN, you don't need to sacrifice speed for security. You have access to over 6,000 ultra-fast servers that allow you to browse without restrictions, access new content, and keep enjoying your favorite shows and movies while traveling. Moreover, NordVPN protects you against a wide range of digital dangers, from malware and trackers to unsafe sites and applications. Here's a fun fact. If you connect using a server in Albania, you'll notice most ads disappear, making your browsing experience much cleaner and more enjoyable. NordVPN is compatible with many devices, including Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux, and allows you to connect up to 10 devices simultaneously with just one account. Don't wait any longer to protect yourself. Visit nordvpn.com/VisualPolitikEN and take advantage of a special offer. Get 4 extra months with your 2-year subscription. And if it doesn't meet your expectations, you've got 30 days to try it out with no commitment. What do you say? Are you up for giving it a chance?
In the firing line.
For years now, Washington politicians have had TikTok in their sights. In 2020, for example, Donald Trump already tried to shut down this application, although he failed in the attempt. Since then, investigations and congressional hearings have followed one after the other regarding this platform. The curious thing is that in a country where politics is divided in half, the bipartisan support for the process against TikTok has been enormous. To give you an idea, the vote on the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, which is what the legal text that opens the door to the banning of the Chinese app is called, went ahead in the House of Representatives with 352 votes in favor and only 65 against. In fact, this operation is the talk of Washington politicians. This is, for example, what Washington Republican Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers told TikTok's CEO in a Senate hearing. You will see that she doesn't hold back.
We do not trust TikTok will ever embrace American values. TikTok has repeatedly chosen the path for more control, more surveillance, and more manipulation. Your platform should be banned.
Exactly the same as Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher.
This is my message to TikTok. Break up with the Chinese Communist Party or lose access to your American users.
And this is despite the fact that we are in an election year and that the vast majority of Americans do not support the closure of this application. Specifically, according to a recent Associated Press poll, just over 30% of Americans support this decision. However, you will soon see, in this case, even the votes have been absolutely equal. At the end of April, the bill was passed by the Senate and signed by an enthusiastic Joe Biden. And that's that. Unless TikTok changes hands to a buyer who has the approval of the President of the United States and definitively breaks with China on 19th of January 2025, the application will be banned in this country. Well, that's what the law says. Because, not surprisingly, the company has not stood idly by.
TikTok sues U.S. government over law forcing sale or ban. The social media company and its Chinese parent, ByteDance, sued to challenge the new law, saying it violated users' First Amendment rights.
This is not the first time TikTok has had to go to court.
It can't be controlled for security reasons by China. Too big, too invasive.
Back in 2020, when the Trump administration wanted to shut them down, they managed to win the court battle. The courts said the president did not have that authority. When in 2023 the state of Montana did the same, it was a very similar story. The courts ruled in favor of TikTok by ruling that individual states could not legislate on national security. Now, this company will seek the same result, but with an act of Congress in place, it will be much more difficult for the courts to find in their favor. Be that as it may, with this legal battle ahead, the process is likely to drag on beyond 19th of January. And so, if one thing is clear, it is that the commitment of both Capitol Hill and the White House is very clear. TikTok, as we know it, must be ended. Now, the question is, what on earth do the congressmen, President Biden, and the rest of the cabinet have against this application? Why such an obsession with TikTok? Don't they like making pizza dough with chickpeas? Or watching cat videos? No, that can't be it. There has to be another explanation. And yes, logically, we can find a good explanation. Well, more specifically, we can find three. These are the three reasons why the United States has declared war on the most successful app in recent years. First, Congress is concerned that TikTok may give the Chinese government access to the personal data of 150 million Americans. For instance, this information could help China tell companies what to produce and sell to Americans, from kitchen equipment to makeup. This could allegedly be detrimental to the competitiveness of American or other Western companies. In other words, data theft could be something of a competitive advantage for Chinese companies. It could also facilitate, if necessary, harassment and pressure campaigns, identity theft, or who knows what. Second, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence itself stated in its assessment before Congress in February that TikTok accounts run by a propaganda arm of the People's Republic of China were proliferating. In other words, a platform such as TikTok could harbor large campaigns seeking to influence the US elections. The problem is that this argument is the weakest, because this also happens on Facebook, Instagram, or even right here on YouTube. In recent years, both Russia and China have increasingly been making efforts to create campaigns in their favor by means of supposedly independent accounts. This is something that is quite well known. Want an example? Well, there is the case of Vika Lee, a content creator who defines herself as a life blogger and food lover. Sounds appealing, right? The problem is that this creator has direct contact with CGTN, the Chinese government television network and propaganda apparatus. Of course, in her videos, everything in China is always wonderful, and how could you possibly doubt that? Yes, she is showing it to you. This is just one example. In fact, according to an investigation by Miburo, a company that tracks foreign disinformation operations, the Chinese government is said to be behind dozens and dozens of content creators in 38 different languages.
You can see how they're trying to infiltrate every one of these countries. It is just about volume. Ultimately, if you just bombard an audience for long enough with the same narratives, people will tend to believe them over time.
But let me stress, everything that I have told you so far also happens here on YouTube. So I don't think this argument can be used to justify the end of TikTok. This is by far the main concern behind the veto of TikTok. As we've already mentioned, more than 70 million Americans already use TikTok to follow the news, particularly the younger ones, and this number is growing steadily. In fact, while in 2020, only 3% of adults used this application to follow the news, today that figure is already 14%. In other words, those users have multiplied by more than 4 in just 3 years. Logically, this gives immense power to the application, especially if we take into account that it is the algorithm that decides what content to bombard users with. It is the algorithm, the search engine, the neural network, whatever you want to call it, that decides what you see, and above all, what you don't see. And this is a problem. Among other things, because the algorithm doesn't even belong to TikTok. It is owned and operated by ByteDance. ByteDance is the company that owns TikTok. They are not the same. ByteDance is a Chinese company. It is subject to Chinese government regulation. A Communist Party unit is part of its structure, and the algorithm itself is considered a strategic asset. This means that if ByteDance wants to do anything with the system, such as sell it or transfer it abroad, it needs the direct approval of the Chinese government. In other words, tens of millions of Americans are informed by means of an app that decides what content to bombard them with from a system that may ultimately be controlled by the Communist Party of China. Are you starting to see where the problem lies? The government, congressmen, and national security agencies fear that when the time comes, China may be sneaking in and out of agenda items, promoting and censoring content. You know, it's all about the algorithm.
You're placing the control of information, like what information America's youth gets, in the hands of America's foremost adversary.
And take note, because this is something that could already be happening. Perhaps in a more timid way, but there are indications that this could be the way forward. For example, in December 2023, a study was presented comparing content on Instagram and TikTok in relation to certain political topics. And do you know what the finding was? Systematically, TikTok seems to hide any negative news regarding China, while also promoting more pro-Russian and pro-Palestinian content, two topics that happen to coincide precisely with Beijing's agenda. This is something it would make things like this easier.
Kiev says Russian operatives dominating on TikTok in Ukraine.
And so, content related to politics in Hong Kong or Tibet disappear. And be aware that it's not just about this study. The Wall Street Journal has conducted an investigation that has shown evidence that TikTok is stealthily and imperceptibly promoting extreme anti-Israel content. And regardless of these studies, the risk is real. Imagine that suddenly TikTok starts favoring one type of content with an ideological tinge and stealthily hides the rest. With that algorithm switch from kitten and dog videos, you could suddenly be bombarded with ideologically charged videos. It would be a fierce propaganda device. And best of all, if done right, no one would even notice. And keep in mind, this problem doesn't affect only TikTok. The rest of the platforms, such as YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, could have the same power. And that is what makes the debate on the regulation of algorithms such a hot topic.
Not a single thing that we heard in today's classified briefing was unique to TikTok. It was things that happen on every single social media platform.
In other words, this is a real, potentially very serious problem that affects all platforms. But of course, the case of TikTok is even worse, because its algorithm is ultimately under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And precisely because of this, the bipartisan political majority has been overwhelming. But okay, so some of you may be wondering, but But let's see, if this is so potentially serious, has Washington been twiddling its thumbs for all these years and doing nothing until now? Well, TikTok has been negotiating for a long time with the so-called Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which is the agency in charge of controlling the operations of foreign companies and investors in the country. In fact, the Chinese company introduced the so-called Texas Project to store all US user data on domestic servers run by software giant Oracle. They also offered to work closely with the US government, which would have to approve the hiring of personnel responsible for data management, content moderation, etc., etc. So what's the problem? That the algorithm would ultimately still be in China. Now, what about freedom of expression? In fact, this is the main argument of the people who oppose this operation. And there is debate here, because naturally, these platforms are very large. And what the algorithm could do is precisely censoring the communication of thousands and creators, and that ultimately would be an attack on freedom of expression. And perhaps many of you, at this very moment, are thinking about freedom of enterprise. But guess what? It's a complex issue. But the truth is that in the United States, laws that have limited the capacity of large media groups in order to ensure plurality have been a constant throughout its history. For example, at the beginning of the 20th century, Congress prohibited the sale of radio stations to foreign operators. This was later extended to television as well. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch, for example, had to renounce his Australian citizenship in order to develop his media empire in the United States, something very similar to what is now being asked of TikTok. Just take a look at this news item from 1985.
Murdoch becomes US citizen, can buy TV network.
This is similar to what has also happened recently, both in the United States and in the European Union, with Russia Today. So you see, when it comes to media and communication platforms and foreign investors, there have always been limits, and TikTok is basically touching those limits. Of course, it's not that simple. ByteDance is now required to sell TikTok and to completely sever its ties with China. However, this may not be so easy. Why? Well, let's take a look.
Uncontrolled pressure.
As you have seen, the conditions imposed by the United States are very clear. However, even if TikTok or ByteDance wanted to, it might not be that simple to comply. Why? Well, we can highlight two major problems. First, we're talking about a big business. ByteDance is valued at about $225 billion, and TikTok's US division alone could be worth as much as $84 billion. In other words, the companies that could afford this operation, such as Microsoft, Alphabet, YouTube will probably love it, or Meta, are the same ones being investigated by US antitrust authorities. Any other alternative would be practically giving away this asset. On top of that, and as we have seen before, this would take China out of the equation, but the main problem would persist. If we really believe that there is a potential problem with the algorithm, in that case, unbundling TikTok is not enough. The second problem is that the Chinese government has already made it very clear, actively and passively, that it would oppose this operation, and that under no circumstances will it allow the algorithm to be transferred or licensed to the United States. So even if ByteDance wanted to sell TikTok, they would have to do it without the engine that gives it life, and that would be a problem. What buyer would want to get a car after you take away the engine and all the parts with technology? Even more so when that would probably mean ruling out the Chinese market for good. So you see, even if ByteDance were willing to divest itself of TikTok in the United States, the deal might not be that simple. Put another way, that there is a significant real risk that ultimately, on 19th of January 2025, the trajectory of this social media platform will come to an end in the United States of America. But that said, now the questions are for you. And I think this time it's very clear. Do you support the threatened shutdown of TikTok? Do you think it could really be a security risk? Or do you think that the US government is overreacting and that freedom of speech and enterprise should take precedence? As always, leave your impressions down in the comments. And now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you so very much for watching. All the best. See you next time.
I love scrolling through and getting to know the woman who works. Period.